Day 3 of the August 96 10-day retreat in Springwater. Someone said, when you refer to the depth of seeing, or seeing deeply, or questioning deeply, it's confusing to me when I just sit openly there in touch with what comes up, happens around me. Does that sound as a familiar problem? See, in sitting quietly, even though the fan is humming, clicking, breathing, a bird calling, the mind open, quiet, at ease. Depth becomes a concept, or is seen as a concept, isn't it? There's nothing to question or investigate when that state manifests. And yet, most of the time, there isn't this kind of sitting, or walking, or being. The mind is occupied with itself, its past, its future, its problems, its sorrows and fears and desires, or its upsets, which may have just happened a little while ago, getting upset over something a neighbor does, or a note is written to one. And there's churning, not just in the mind, not just thoughts floating around, circulating, looping, but there are emotions, tensions. At that moment, how can one listen? There may not be any listening or attending. There's such absorptions in the process. But there's waking up to the fact of what is going on. That there is absorption, there is upset, there are emotions, there are problems. And how quiet can there be listening to what is happening? Don't get confused or stuck with the words that are used this time or that. Words are very flexible. They don't have to be used. A different word may apply more to one's condition. So this time I said, how quiet can there be the listening to the upset or emotion, to the body aching, the mind fluttering. And quiet listening, not measured in amplitudes or depth measured in meters. It is the coming upon and maybe dropping away of resistance, not wanting this thing to be there, which is there, manifesting naturally. We talked yesterday about how thoughts evoke emotions. That happens very naturally. Here it is, the body doing its duty. So is it possible to listen without resistance? Feeling the resistance first and seeing it's in the way. Can it be seen that resistance, tensing against something, aggravates the condition? It doesn't open it up and free. So, in attending to the state of the body-mind or the natural world around one, the birds and traffic, can there be an ever increasing quietness, which means an ever diminishing resistance or need to know what it is, noticing that needing to know, to label, to explain is the world of words and thoughts and memories, but not this immediacy of experiencing what is actually happening. I never say get rid of resistance or don't resist or don't expect. Don't find fault, but notice it. And let the intrinsic wisdom of awareness illuminate it and see that it is in the way. It is not needed in the immediacy of contact, which is our true being. Immediacy of contact, meaning not mediated by any thought or explanation. Sweating without mediation. So, does it begin to clear up when there's nothing there to be questioned, nothing in the way? No need to drag in a question, because I think I'm supposed to question here, to see that as our conventional way of thinking and obeying, creating authority and following authority. That is not indicated. To see it, to understand it, and be done with it. But when things are churning, upsetting, fearing or paining, then what is it? What is going on? One has felt it all one's life, but maybe never once completely listened and been in touch, without any escape or medication. By medication I mean doing something about it. Just the utter pureness of allowing what is there to reveal itself, to be felt, seen, heard, in a listening space that is open and quiet. At this moment it comes to mind that someone asked in a group, I've had in the past spiritual practice where my practice was to ask, what is it? Whatever comes up, and it became quite mechanical. Is there a danger in what you're talking about to become mechanical? Experiencing fear or sorrow, to sort of mechanically ask, what is it? What is it? Which would be again an escape, wouldn't it? to say, what is it, on every exhalation, automatically. Isn't this softness, aliveness of touch, pleasant or unpleasant, painful or joyful? Which is there. It doesn't have to be brought about through practice. And yet, to wonder what something is, it may not even have to take the shape of a question. But the mind is very trained, very habituated in formulating, verbally or pictorially. That's all right, as long as it doesn't become a mechanical hum. Which then becomes the important thing to keep up, to remain concentrated on, not to lose my practice. But the actual condition which brought about the question is lost, is overturned, hidden, covered, by installing a practice. This is in answer to someone who asked about the danger of asking, what is it? So how alive and genuine can this question be, verbally or non-verbally? Wondering for the first time what this is that is manifesting here. It may be a pain or a resistance or this deeply ingrained sense of being something. Whatever. Not taking it for granted, ignoring it, attaching to it, but a free wondering. Free wondering meaning leaving it alone, not zeroing in on it, focusing exclusively on this thing. Everything that's happening happens in vast space, which is whole and without seams or borders. Simultaneously with everything else. So let it be heard and felt in the spacious openness in which trucks roar and birds sing and the hum of insects permeates everything. Somebody mentioned that this morning, saying in the beginning of this retreat, I try to focus on this or on that, on the trucks or on the birds, on my breathing, or the buzz of insects. And then it so happened, after the talk, something shifted. The focus was gone. And everything happened at once, together, undivided. Not thought directing the attention to this or that. And with that, dividing this from that. So then does the question arise, how can I bring this about? This is what I want. Yesterday we talked about the depth of being. Someone saying, how can I get that? That's what I want. This wanting it and belaboring it, wanting a technique to get there, is the very division, the very separation from what is here quite effortlessly and naturally. How it happens to manifest, to come into awareness, or awareness to be there so wholly and seamlessly, I don't know. It's always there. How come we don't see it? I don't know. All we can look at and talk about and bring into awareness is the obstacles, the hindrances, the resistance. Resistance keeps coming up because it seems as though our whole life of me-ness is resistance to simply being here. Non-pretentiously. Aimlessly, if you will, without a direction, because there is no direction. Everything is here. Another question coming to mind: in watching things, observing what is going on, the thoughts that come and go and swirl around, there's always me observing. And it seems to me, says the person, as though this attending to everything only reinforces and strengthens the sense of me. Does that sound familiar? Is there already an initial effort? I must pay attention because I'm here, which is the me, with its musts and duties and projects. Always needing to do something, to fulfill or achieve something. It is our habit, ingrained since we've been born, and taking that habit over from those who came before us. Having to attain and to achieve. The quick absencing in our youth of effortless being, with its joy and interest and energy. So this deep-seated feeling that there's not just the breathing and the birds singing and the cicadas chirping, but there's me perceiving it, me attending to it, is the very expression of the sense of division, isn't it? And feeling caught in it. Because the more I think I ought to attend, or the more I think I ought to get rid of the observer, the stronger this battle of me against my condition, trying to improve it, trying to get rid of it. So what makes up the sense of the separate observer? We may have never asked this question, take it so much for granted that it is me who is observing the floor. Who else is observing it? Of course, there are other me's who are also observing the floor. So the idea is so deeply ingrained that when something is seen, there is a seer. When something is heard, there is a hearer. When something is experienced, there is an experiencer. When action happens, there must be an actor. We think in those categories. We have been trained to think this way because everybody else around us also thinks in that way. So, is one willing or interested in questioning this assumption? Not question the assumption that there's a body with very sensitive organs of perception. And an incredible brain to interpret, to store, to bring up from memory. That can be questioned too, what this is all about. But that's not what we're questioning right now, that there's an organism alive and operating. But we're questioning this mental picture, deeply ingrained, or idea, that it is me who is observing. Or is it possible to at least say in the beginning, it may not be clear, but to speak of observation, there's hearing, there's attending, there's birds chirping and breath flowing, and abstaining from the language that wants to own it all as mine. Establishing in that way an owner of the hearing, an owner of the seeing, a thinker of the thinking. Can't thoughts just flow and sounds just sound and air just cool or heat and traffic roar? Or be quiet? To be amazed at this continuous habit to bring me as an idea, as a picture, a memory, into connection with everything that happens. And that happens verbally. It goes so quick, the thought, oh, I got that, or I didn't get it, I heard it, I missed it. The constant, continuous rebirth of me and mine and I and you, mentally created. And therefore, because of the power of mental imagery affecting our perception of ourselves and each other. Because will one now make a technique out of changing one's language, hoping to get results that way? It doesn't quite work that way. And yet, to fully appreciate the power of language upon our behavior, our perceptions, that they are not free and open. As long as this language web keeps weaving. The separate me, the separate you, the separate objects out there which I, in my separation, see and hear. Of course, other elements make up this separate observer, not just the way we talk about it habitually since time immemorial, but also the free-flowing habit of judgment. I don't like this sound, I don't like this feeling, but that feeling I love, I want to keep it. I want to feel like this forever. I'm afraid I won't get enough of it. This makes up the separate observer. Judging, wanting, grasping or rejecting habitually. Nobody is doing this grasping or rejecting. It happens as an automatic reaction. And it will remain automatic until it is seen clearly in a moment of waking up to it. At that moment of waking up to a reaction of rejecting a feeling of pain, it may not continue. Because it's seen to be in the way of being in direct touch with the pain. And in this direct touch with pain, which is ever more quiet, the observer or experiencer fades away, and there's just what is. Not even labeled pain anymore. It's not necessary to have a label for it, because that limits and constricts it. What is happening is without limit and constriction, is a free-flowing affair which has no permanent duration. And probably everyone here has experienced that in the past, or in the past few days, that states of mind and body come and go. Some may last longer, may have a chronic illness, but even there it's so helpful not to fixate it in ideas it will last forever. Not know it, but be it, without the separate me owning this or fighting it or holding on to it, which are all observable movements of the mind. All of this may be a bit much on day 3. That's the hazard of holding so many retreats a year. We just move on. We should start more from the beginning. But there are meetings. You can bring it up, and 10 minutes can be quite a bit of time to look at something that seems so far out, not understandable, and we can bring it right down to this moment. So it happened to someone this morning. It happens to human beings here and there at any time, that this division between observer and what is heard or observed drops away, and there's just what is, which is our true state of being, undivided. And it may return. I think the person reported that now there's this frazzled energy again, jumping from this to that. But maybe there's a little bit of wisdom retained. At least not to be so locked into the assumptions of separation that we live with so painfully and hurtfully. But it's not enough to remember a moment in which there was no division and just implant into the mind this new idea, even though there are schools of teaching, of firmly implanting the right idea, that we're the whole thing, that we're not separate, and just sticking to that idea until the truth of it directly manifests. One can experiment with this. And yet, as we talked yesterday with great intensity, we need to understand this hard crust of conditioning which encloses us, the habits, the assumptions, the ideas and imagery about myself, as it manifests when somebody says something that hurts the image of me, the pain that wells up or the anger, to question it. Not just to say, well, that's very natural, that's my right, I shouldn't be treated this way. I have a right to fight back, I should stand firm, assert myself. I'm not saying anything against these injunctions, but they hide questioning. What is going on when I feel so hurt because of what somebody said to me or did to me? What's really happening as anger or pain wells up and ideas form to pay back, to take revenge? Can this all come under investigation? Not just be labeled a natural response, which is justified. Not easy. We live with it all the time. Once we're hurt, we're so absorbed in it, flooded with chemicals throughout the organism, which do their habitual thing of inciting to action or to violence or to withdrawal. And yet we never give up wondering about it and talking about it. Because the moment may dawn in which one is not just absorbed and flushed with it, but stops and wonders what is going on. What is getting hurt and how does it manifest? Not historically in my past, but right now, this moment. Of going over and over what happened, sharing it with others to get sympathy or support, or resolving I can't deal with this person anymore, I will avoid contact, and then harboring a grudge, which is our mental baggage, all the wrinkles throughout this organism. Before we really get wrinkled outwardly, there's already inward wrinkles of grudges, resistances, hurts. And in an open, quiet retreat like this, to which so much care is given by people who attend to it, we don't have a thing to do except an hour of work. No telephone to call us, no messages, no duties, no shopping, no office, no family. Maybe a little bit of family. Or a big family. And yet even there, the opportunity to stop, look, and listen in a new way to what normally gets little or no attention, is just brushed over or aside in our hectic routine of getting things done and never quite getting everything done. So what gets hurt when I hurt? Or something somebody else did, or something remembered that happened to me. relationship with someone else. Not I shouldn't get hurt, but what is it that gets hurt? And is it possible not to get hurt, even though people will intentionally or inadvertently hurt one? We think much more it's intentional than it actually is. Very often, a person may not even be aware having hurt one. May not even have said something in anger, and yet the person feels yelled at. Is it possible not to get hurt? Or is that an outrageous, unrealistic question? Calling for idealism, which I'm not calling for. I'm calling for being here, present, and listening as somebody approaches angrily or aggressively or passively aggressively, all of these categories we have. And be there so completely, so attentively, not as a measure of self-protection, but this is our real true state. That what somebody says or does not become the cause of an effect. The words somebody speaks, the critical words, or messing with my business, getting into my turf, doing something that is not his or her job, that does not become the cause of an effect here, the effect being hurt, anger, upset. When he is in Buddhism, I don't know how many people are familiar with it, quite a few, breaking the chain of causation, freedom from the chain of causation. And I always grappled with this. What does this mean? It is so hard to understand abstractly. And it is so simple, concretely. You say something and I listen so completely that there's no effect. And that's not indifference. Not indifference like a shell, a protective shell. One can grow that. So things just bounce off. They don't get hurt anymore. And a lot of us have learned that. In our childhood, we may get so much nagging and correcting that we just begin not to hear it anymore. Maybe beginning to read. A lot of children find that reading keeps the parents at bay. Parents like children to read. And if I'm so absorbed in my reading, I didn't hear what you said or what you asked me to do. So these protective mechanisms have grown in all of us, but I'm not talking about that. It is a totally open, vulnerable presence. There is no one to be hurt. There is no reference to me and my past and my status, how I should be addressed or not addressed. All of that is at ease, quiet, in abeyance. And the energy is just here with a buzzing bee. And the warm air and the dripping skin. And people listening, humming like insects. things are not clear or have not been expressed clearly, please, and you want to pursue this, it sort of rings a bell someplace. Come to meetings. We still have today and tomorrow, and then there are 2 days of meetings with each other. It's good to discuss these things with each other. If you're so inclined, you may want to sit quietly, not talk with anyone. We will end here for today.